My name is Elena Brooks. I'm 28, and until a few months ago, everyone in my life, including the man I married, believed I was an executive assistant at a large tech company in downtown Denver. That was true, in a way, but it wasn't the whole truth. Brooks isn't my legal last name. It's my mother's maiden name. My father is Graham Langford, and he's the president and CEO of Langford Systems, the very company where I answered phones, booked flights, and fetched coffees. 5 years earlier, when I was 23 and a soon-to-be college graduate, my father invited me to lunch and told me quietly, "If you ever want to lead what I've built, you have to understand how it breathes from the ground floor. No shortcuts, no special treatment." I remember setting my fork down, feeling the gravity of his words. He didn't say I could never rise. He said I had to rise the right way. So after graduating with honors in business administration, I submitted my resume to HR without any hint of who I really was. I took the entry interview among a dozen hopefuls in a conference room with buzzing fluorescent lights and an ancient coffee pot off to the side. When the offer came for an executive assistant role supporting a senior VP, I signed the paperwork as Elena Brooks. In the early days, when someone would mention Mr. Langford with a certain blend of awe and exasperation, I'd keep my face still and my tone neutral, nodding like any other new hire trying to learn how to survive the place. It was strange and, in a way, liberating to be invisible. By my second year in the job, I could translate the entire company calendar like a second language. I knew which directors actually read reports and which skimmed the first page and then asked for a summary. I learned who lifted others and who collected credit. That was the season I met a sales executive named Brandon Whitaker. He was tall, charismatic, relentless in quarters when quotas were tight, and charming at company parties when the bar finally opened. He had a way of standing at just the right angle so the spotlight hit him first. We crossed paths over a scheduling mess for a cross-functional pitch. I stayed late at my desk trying to untangle a triple-booked conference room. Brandon rolled his chair over to my side of the table like we were co-conspirators. "You just solved a problem that's been driving 3 teams crazy for a week," he said, tapping the calendar invite I'd just sent. "You're not like the other assistants here. You've got taste, presence, class, even if your job title doesn't reflect it yet." There was a little laugh in his voice when he said "even if," the kind of laugh that should have made me step back. But I was 24 and flattered by attention from someone who seemed to glow under the office lights. The next week, he asked me out. We met for drinks on a Wednesday because he said Fridays belonged to celebrations with the team. He wore a navy jacket and a smile that suggested the city was already in his pocket. "I like how direct you are," he told me that night, after listening to me talk about my mother and how she'd rebuilt her life after a tough divorce in my teen years. "You don't play games." It felt like a compliment. It was easy to ignore the undertone. He was telling me he preferred me earnest, uncomplicated, grateful. It's remarkable how love can wrap around a warning sign and make it look like a ribbon. A year later, we got married at a small chapel in City Park. My father came, of course. He hugged me with the ache only a parent knows and gave Brandon a firm handshake. Something in him had tightened during the engagement, something unspoken. A week before the wedding, he'd asked me in his office, "Are you certain about this man?" "He loves me for me," I said. "He doesn't know about you. He doesn't know about any of it." "That's part of what bothers me," my father replied. "People show you who they are when they think there's nothing to be gained." But he respected my decision. He walked me down the aisle and placed my hand in Brandon's, and we promised each other a future we were both sure we wanted. I moved into a modest walk-up near Capitol Hill. The rent matched what 2 mid-level professionals could afford. We ate at small neighborhood places where servers knew your order by the 3rd visit. We shared a car. We made plans, travel someday, a better place when the timing was right, maybe children when our savings felt stable. On the surface, our first 2 years looked good. We had a rhythm. We had inside jokes. We had Friday nights where Brandon brought home takeout and perched on the couch with his laptop on his knees, toggling between a sales dashboard and streaming whatever game was on. But I can see now how often his jokes took shape around what people did for a living, how his laugh was loudest when someone slipped and revealed insecurity. "I don't get it," he'd grumble after an exhausting quarter. "A closer like me should be sitting at a bigger table. Why won't the old guy at the top notice?" The old guy. He meant my father, who had in fact noticed, but not the way Brandon imagined. When Madison Hale arrived at Langford Systems as our new marketing director, she brought the kind of expensive perfume you can smell in a room long after the person has left. Madison was the granddaughter of a family with a name you might find on a library wing or arts center. She had the polished posture of someone taught to make you believe she owned every space she entered. She once joked over lunch that she'd been born in the very important person lane and laughed like it was the wittiest line in the world. At first, she was only a new face at the weekly stand-up, another leader with a deck and a timeline. Then she and Brandon started appearing together on calendars. Late edit, one invite would read, share a voice analysis, final pitch rehearsal. Brandon began coming home at odd hours with a tiny cologne of something floral clinging to his collar. His phone buzzed after midnight, and he'd turn it over so the screen faced the table. When I asked, he said I was reading into things. It's a campaign, he'd say, as if the word itself explained everything. We're grinding. She's intense. If there's a skill my 5 years taught me, it was how to keep a calm face in a storm. I didn't fight him. I watched. I took note of new silences between us and the way he said we when talking about the department now, as if I was outside a circle that used to include me. One afternoon, while organizing briefing packets in a conference space between the 12th floor corridors, I heard two voices move into the empty hall, low at first, then unmistakable. The wall vent carried their conversation as clearly as if I'd been standing beside them. When are you going to stop dragging this out? Madison's voice had that patient scold I'd heard her use when a junior designer asked too many questions in a meeting. You don't need to keep pretending you're devoted to that assistant. I said I'm working on it, Brandon replied. Timing matters. I don't need drama with the execs. You deserve someone who can open doors, she said. I can do that. I've told you what's on the table. Just decide. I set my stapler down very carefully so it wouldn't make a sound. It's funny what the body does when your life shifts under your feet. My pulse hammered in my temples, but my hands were steady. I gathered the packets, walked to my desk, and answered an email about a flight change. That night, the quiet in our apartment crackled when I turned the key. Brandon was waiting in the living room in a pressed shirt like he'd dressed for a second audience. He didn't ask about my day. We need to talk, he said. I figured. My voice sounded far away to me. Is this about Madison? He blinked. The name startled him for a beat, and then he recovered. Yes, he said, pressing his lips together. About Madison. About us. He inhaled, as if he'd rehearsed this. Elena, we're different people. We come from different worlds. You've always known that. What worlds are those? I asked. I'd meant it gently, but it came out like a cut. The world I'm headed to, he said, chest rising. I've been offered a senior role by Madison's family company. It's a real step up, more than 3 times what I make now, over 300,000. It's a chance to get where we've always imagined. The door opened behind him as if on cue. Madison stepped inside without a knock, heels clicking softly on the floor, a faint smile on her mouth like she was greeting an understudy. You told her? She asked, as if evaluating his delivery. Not everything yet, Brandon said. I stood. The light on the bookshelf behind them made a thin gold outline over Madison's hair. Get out, Brandon said suddenly, the softness gone. He jabbed his finger toward the door. Pack your things and go. Madison can give me the life I deserve. The cruelty of that sentence floated in the air for a breath before it landed. Madison tilted her head. You should be grateful we're being straightforward, she said. It's kinder this way. Honestly, I always thought you were miscast. It is an odd thing to feel your heart break and your spine strengthen at the exact same time. While they spoke, a switch flipped inside me. I had kept a secret for 5 years to understand people without the filter of power. If Brandon had loved me, he would have loved me there. In the modest light, in the early mornings when I packed his lunch, in the long evenings when I waited for him to come home. He didn't. I took my phone out of my pocket and scrolled through my contacts until I reached a number I rarely used in the building. I looked at Brandon and then at Madison. Excuse me a moment, I said, and then pressed call. Dad? I said when the line connected. It's me. Tomorrow morning at 9, I'd like you to meet my husband and his colleague. The color drained out of Brandon's face so quickly it left him hollow. Dad? He repeated, voice hitching. What are you talking about? I slid the phone into my pocket. I'm surprised you never put it together, I said, my tone mild. Graham Langford. Ring any bells, Brandon? Madison's carefully built composure flickered. She took one step back as if the floor had changed shape under her. No, she said, but the denial didn't hold even to her own ears. 9 o'clock, I said to the phone before I ended the call. We'll be there. The next morning, I arrived early to the 12th floor. The sun knifed through the glass, laying sharp rectangles across the hall. Word travels faster in a company than any internal memo can explain. By 8:30, whispers were moving like a current through the cubicles. Maya, an assistant who had sat beside me for 3 years and shared snacks and secrets through long afternoons, came to my desk. "Is it true?" she asked. "Are you—" "I am," I answered. "I'm still me." "Why work as an assistant if you didn't have to?" she asked, not with judgment but with curiosity that deserved respect. "Because you can't lead what you don't understand," I said. "And because every person here matters, not just the ones whose names are on the glass doors." At 5 minutes to 9, Brandon and Madison stepped out of the elevator. Brandon's eyes were rimmed and red, his jaw tight like he was clenching through pain. Madison was as polished as ever, but I saw the tremor in her hand where she pinched her handbag strap. "Good morning," I said, standing. "Mr. Langford is expecting you." Brandon leaned toward me, lowering his voice. "Elena, come on. Let's not do this. We can figure something out." "Figure out which part?" I asked. "How you were lying to your wife, or what you said about just an assistant in the same breath you were asking me to support your goals?" I kept my tone even and watched the words land. "Let's go." The doors to the corner office opened. My father stood framed in the doorway, tall in a charcoal suit, the lines at the corners of his eyes deeper than they had been a year ago. "Please, come in," he said. His voice filled the room without needing volume. We sat, Brandon and Madison across from the desk, me in the chair near the window where I'd sat for countless briefings on budgets and HR policies no one read. My father folded his hands over a legal pad and studied them for a long breath before he spoke. "So," he said softly, "I finally meet my son-in-law and his friend." "Mr. Langford," Brandon began, his voice cracking, "this isn't— there are explanations." "For what exactly?" my father asked. "For the way you have deceived my daughter? Or shall we start with the documents you sent to outside accounts from our internal servers?" Madison stiffened. "That's outrageous," she said. "You can't prove—" My father pressed a button on his desk phone. "Sandra," he said, "please send in legal." The door opened. 3 attorneys entered, each with a binder. The lead counsel, a man who said almost nothing in public but saw nearly everything, set one binder on the desk and opened it to a page with highlighted threads of emails. "Over the past 3 months," he said, "we've discovered repeated transfers of proprietary information, market strategies, client prospecting data, and budget forecasts to external addresses linked to shell accounts. We have already received confirmations from our security vendor, and we are prepared to cooperate with law enforcement." Brandon's shoulders dropped like someone had cut the strings holding him upright. "I was trying to secure a future," he said, words stumbling over each other. "I thought," Madison said. My voice surprised even me. "Our future?" I asked. "The one we promised each other when we stood in front of our friends? Or a future where my devotion paid your bills while you chased a richer woman's shadow?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. My father turned to me and lowered his voice. "Elena," he said, "do you want me to proceed?" I looked at Brandon, the man whose toothbrush sat beside mine, whose name was on the lease, whose favorite mug still had coffee rings in our sink, and I saw the truth unvarnished. He had calculated my value in comparison to what he could get with someone else. He would do it again if the math worked. "Yes," I said. "Proceed." "You can't do this," Madison snapped, standing so quickly her chair scraped the floor. "You have no idea the kind of influence my family has." "Miss Hale," my father replied, polite as if they were at a charity gala, "your family's company is in serious trouble. Your CFO has been shopping assets quietly for months, and you've been desperately seeking inside information to keep the facade from cracking. Influence is a thin shield when the numbers stop adding up." Madison swallowed. I watched her face run through denial, outrage, and calculation in the space of a heartbeat. For once, she had no line ready. "You are both terminated, effective immediately," my father said. "Security will escort you to collect your personal items. Our counsel will be in touch about the next steps. If you have legal representation, you may direct them to us." Brandon turned toward me and then did something I didn't expect. He slid from the chair to his knees and reached for my hand. "Elena," he said with a desperation that made the hair on my arms rise. "I love you. I was stupid. I can fix this." I pulled my hand away. "The saddest part," I said, "isn't that you chose money. It's that you believed I was unworthy of your respect unless I could get you into rooms you weren't willing to earn. I kept my name quiet to build something real. You saw that quiet as a weakness. That's what I can't forgive." Security arrived. As they led them toward the door, Madison looked back, her chin lifting in a final attempt at dominance. All this, she sneered. For what? To teach a lesson? No, I said, standing. To make it clear that character isn't measured by your last name or your salary offer, it's measured by what you do when you think no one is watching. When the door closed, my father came around the desk and delivered a kind of embrace that said 100 things without words: pride, sorrow, relief. I should have warned you harder, he said against my hair. I should have insisted. No, I said, stepping back to look at him. You taught me to see for myself. I had to live this part. The days that followed moved like a train in motion. HR took statements. Security handed over their findings to the authorities. I slept at my friend Lucy's apartment for a week, while Brandon picked up his things in scheduled windows with a guard present. He left the mug. I threw it away. At work, the story spread faster than any corporate newsletter could keep up. Some people looked at me with a curiosity that felt like heat on my skin. Others, the ones who had always treated me like a person rather than a service, greeted me the same way they had a week before, with a smile and a question about how I was holding up. Cara Denby, an operations manager who once tossed a coat on my desk without looking at me and said, "Be a doll and have this cleaned by 2, appeared in the elevator lobby one morning and blocked my path with a bright, brittle smile. Elena, I've always admired your potential, she said. Said it from day one. Did you? I asked gently. Because I remembered the day you told a room that assistants should know their place. Her mouth opened and closed, like a fish out of water. You must have misheard, she said, and then escaped into the elevator. I settled into a new routine. My work moved from calendars and expense reports to strategic reviews and department walkthroughs. I kept visiting the assistant bay, pulling a spare chair beside Maya and asking what made her week harder than it needed to be. Sometimes the answer was a software login bug. Sometimes it was a director who believed 2 minutes was an acceptable buffer for a day's worth of tasks. I wrote things down. I made changes where I could. It was small and it was practical, and it was exactly the point of why I had started the way I did. 2 months later, Maya burst into my office without knocking, eyes wide, breath quick. You need to see this, she said, holding out her tablet. An article on a business news site filled the screen. Marketing heiress arrested in corporate espionage case. I read the piece quietly. It mentioned Madison by name and described a pattern stretching back years. Proprietary data lifted from multiple employers, each incident disguised under confidentiality agreements and friends in the right circles. It said an unnamed sales executive from our company had entered a plea deal in exchange for cooperation. I set the tablet down and leaned back. People assume news like that feels triumphant, like justice marching in a clean line. It doesn't. It felt like closure, like a door finally latched. I didn't want to hurt Brandon. I wanted him to stop hurting me. That afternoon, an envelope arrived at my office with my name written in a handwriting I knew intimately. The slanted letters, the heavy downstrokes. I recognized the return address of the county detention center. I opened it and read, Elena, I don't deserve your time, but I need to say this. I did what I did because I was greedy and I was afraid. I wanted to be someone and convinced myself that cutting corners made me clever instead of wrong. When I met you, I loved you. Your steadiness, your mind, the way you never tried to impress anyone. Then I let Madison tell me I was entitled to more. I don't expect your forgiveness. I only want you to know that my biggest regret isn't the job or the charges. It's losing the only person who told me the truth and loved me anyway. Brandon. I placed the letter in a file drawer and shut it. Some apologies are for the sender, not the receiver. I didn't write back. A year passed. I slept well again. I went on runs by Cheeseman Park before the city was fully awake. I started a journal even though I'd always said I didn't have a journaling personality. At work, I helped design a development program that opened pathways for internal promotions at every level. If someone wanted to grow, we found them training, a mentor, a stretch project. The message was simple. The title you start with says nothing about the ceiling of your potential. In December, we hosted our company's winter gathering at a downtown hotel ballroom with strings of white lights and perfect snowflakes drifting sideways outside the tall windows. People wore suits they saved for weddings and holiday parties. Near the end of the night, my father walked to the small stage and tapped the mic. Conversations settled into a hush that felt like a held breath. I've led this company for 30 years, he said, looking out over the faces that had built it with him. It has been the privilege of my life. But there comes a time when you pass the torch to a steadier hand, a sharper eye, a different spine. Next month, I will be stepping back, and I am proud to tell you that our next CEO will be someone who has known this place from the mailroom to the boardroom. Please join me in congratulating my daughter, Elena Langford. For a second, the room was silent in that disbelieving way that comes before a wave. Then the applause swelled warm and long. Maya, standing beside me, squeezed my arm hard. "Your dad must be soaring," she said, tears brightening her eyes. "He is," I said, "and not because of the name on my ID card, because I did this the way he asked me to." In the weeks that followed, I moved offices from the 12th floor corner to the one higher than it. The view felt almost the same, which was fitting. I still walked the same hallways, still stopped to talk to the same security guard at the lobby who told me about his granddaughter's spelling bee, still ducked into the assistant bay to ask who needed an extra pair of hands before lunch. One afternoon, while cleaning out the drawer of my old desk, the one with the sticky handle that had irritated me for 3 years, I found a photograph tucked beneath an employee manual. It was our wedding picture. I held it for a long time. We were smiling. We both looked certain of the future in front of us. I slid the photo into a box of personal items, not because I wanted to display it, but because it was part of my story, and stories have chapters you don't tear out even when the pages hurt. "You okay?" my father asked from the doorway. I hadn't heard him come in. "I am," I said. "I spent a long time wondering if keeping my name quiet was a mistake. Now I know it wasn't. It taught me who people are when they think no one will reward them for being kind." He nodded, eyes soft. "Your mother used to say the way you treat a person who can do nothing for you says everything about who you are." I thought of my mother then, her laugh, her stubborn insistence on dignity, the way she taught me to trust the long story over the short one. "She would have liked today," I said. "She would have liked who you are," he replied. On a rainy evening in March, I drove past the small brick building where I had lived with Brandon. New curtains swayed in the window. A bicycle hung on a balcony rail. Life had moved on inside those walls. That comforted me more than I expected. My phone buzzed with a message from Maya. "You set for tomorrow's Q&A about the internal promotion framework?" "People are buzzing," I texted back. "Ready. See you at 9. In my home office, on a bookshelf that holds my college textbooks, a few framed photos, and a cactus that refuses to die, despite my negligence. I keep 3 things together in one frame: the worn badge from my assistant days, my degree, and the plaque from my first month as CEO. When visitors ask why the badge sits beside the title, I tell them the story I've told you, about a young woman who chose the slow path, about a marriage that taught her the price of confusing charm for character, about a company that became more itself by opening doors from the inside out. In time, even the sharpest memories sanded down into something I could hold without cutting myself. But I didn't forget. I didn't forget the way Brandon dismissed me as just an assistant when he thought the conversation benefited him. I didn't forget the look on Madison's face when she realized titles can't save you from the truth you've lived. And I didn't forget the quiet mornings at my desk when no one knew my name, and I did the work anyway because the work mattered. A few months after the promotion announcement, HR forwarded me an invitation to speak at a local business school. The theme was leadership without shortcuts. I stood at a podium in a lecture hall and told a room of students something I wished someone had told me at 22. Don't chase rooms you haven't earned. Build something so steady that the rooms chase you. After the talk, a woman with a shy smile approached me. "My title is receptionist," she said. "Sometimes people talk past me like I'm furniture." She hesitated. "But I want to grow. What do you need?" I asked. "Someone to show me how," she said. We talked for 20 minutes. I connected her with our HR team. 6 months later, she emailed me a picture of her new office chair with a caption that read, "First day as coordinator. Thank you for seeing me." I printed the email and taped it inside the closet door where I hang my coats at work. It reminds me that organizations aren't made of numbers on a slide. They're made of people who are braver when someone believes in them. Not everything was noble or cinematic. There were boring hours spent in budget reviews, days when the elevator decided to stall between floors, and a week when the espresso machine in the cafe broke and we had to drink conference room coffee like barbarians. There were also small victories that felt like sunlight. A warehouse team getting safer gear after one of their own spoke up and wouldn't be hushed. A junior engineer filing a patent with a mentor's help. An assistant who received a bonus because someone finally logged the dozens of invisible tasks she carried. One year, on the eve of our winter party, I received a short note from Brandon's mother, delivered quietly through a mutual friend. She didn't ask for money or favors, only wrote that she was sorry for the part her son had played in hurting me. I wrote back to say I wished him health and the wisdom to live differently. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was something close to a release. Time gave me back my mornings. It gave me back my appetite. It gave me a life that wasn't defined by the worst thing someone had done to me. Every day I walked into the building, nodded to the same lobby guard, rode the elevator with the same analysts and accountants and designers with headphones around their necks, and felt a simple, profound gratitude. I was here, in a place I understood, doing work that mattered to more than a stock price. Once in a meeting, Kara, the same manager who had tossed her coat on my desk, praised a junior staffer for a clean report and added, almost as an aside, "I'm learning." I believed her. People can change when the structure around them insists on it and supports them through it. I ended up with my own motto scribbled on a notepad during a late-night strategy session, words that summed up the lesson those 5 years had carved into me. We printed it on posters, not as a brand exercise but as a reminder to ourselves. Worth isn't the title you carry, it's the way you carry it. It's on the wall near the break room now, next to photos of teams from different departments celebrating small wins. Sometimes I see someone stop and read it like it's the first time, nod and keep walking a bit straighter. As for the personal part of the story, people always want to know, did you ever fall in love again? The honest answer is that love, to me now, looks like consistency over charm and curiosity over certainty. I've had coffee with a man who teaches middle school math and laughs from his belly, not his throat. I've learned that the most romantic words anyone can say to me are, "I see you," and then prove it in small ways when no one is looking. Some nights, when I leave the office late and the city is a checkerboard of light and shadow, I pause by the window before shutting off my lamp. I think of who I was at 23, walking in on my first day in stiff shoes and a determined heart, and I want to tell her, it's going to hurt. It's going to take longer than you think, but it will be worth the time. Because integrity isn't fast, it's steady. It's how you hold the door open for the person behind you, even when you're in a hurry. It's how you say no to the easiest yes and yes to the better hard. I still keep the assistant badge framed beside the CEO plaque. It's there to remind me of mail runs and calendar fires, and the way my hands trembled the first time I had to tell a director that a meeting he thought was critical was moving because 4 other people's workload mattered more. It's there to remind me of voices I heard in a hallway and a decision I made in a living room with 2 people who didn't think I would stand up. And every morning, when I step into the office and someone says good morning, Elena, with the kind of respect that isn't about fear, I think, I built my life on this ground on purpose. I did not climb a ladder someone extended to me. I learned to lay rungs for the next person. That is what I want to be remembered for. Not a title, not a headline, but a culture. If you've listened this far, tell me where you're listening from. Share the city that feels like home to you. One of my favorite parts of telling stories is hearing yours in return. And if this story meant something to you, your small kindness, your comment, your share, your support, helps me keep bringing you more. There are 2 new stories waiting for you on the screen, and I'd love to see you again in the next one. Until then, be kind in the places where no one is keeping score. That's where character lives.